Fam, what's up? Welcome back to the CEO Pulse podcast, where you get the real, the raw, and the mind of entrepreneurship. Another episode of the infamous now Mindset Monday series with my co-host, Justin Thorstad. Oh, that was good.
Wow.
That was good.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I got inspired with the word infamous, and then
Yeah.
I just kind of went down that route.
Ain't wrong with it.
So I told myself, like, it's pretty interesting. I told myself a whole story right there, like, that just happened. And that's how the inspiration for that intro came about, which leads me to our topic for today's Mindset Monday series, which is about the false stories that we keep telling ourselves, right? All those conversations that happen in our head, and it can be more detrimental than helpful at the end of the day. When people say, we worry about the stuff that's, 90% of the stuff that it's not going to happen, yet it's taking a lot of, free rent in our head. I don't know, over the last couple of days, it's been kind of, bubbling up, right? And those false stories, a lot of times can create a lot of damage and steal away opportunities. I have a case in point or a scenario, right, I'll go over here in a little bit. But it's important to understand, right, that as we go, through life as entrepreneurs, and we're working on growth and mindset and business, and trying to juggle all these different roles and responsibilities, we can create stories in our mind that feel very real.
Sure.
However, they're backed by nothing but assumptions. So that's what we're gonna dive into today.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I mean. It's funny because I've experienced the exact same thing in my organization. People making up stories about certain events, aspects, totally unrelated. But, to remind yourself, like, that's what the mind does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's this incessant chatter. It's just making up stories from old points of references, inaccurate, by the way. And when was the last time you made up a story about a situation without asking questions, without fact-finding, and then at the end of the day, you found out your story was right, and you're so glad you listened? Like, when has that benefited you? Never. Ever.
Yep.
You're always way off. And so it's like, not what has you making up a story, but what has you not opening your mouth to qualify the story, to fact find, to ask questions. You know what I mean? Like, get the facts straight. So.
Yeah, it's it's crazy how often, right, that kind of stuff happens, and how long those conversations in our head kind of go for. And what I'm referring to, it's all that noise that a lot of times we start, just kind of developing, and it turns into this big soap opera in our heads.
Yeah.
Right. As to, okay, why I didn't get that promotion, or why did I fail at that one venture, or why did this seller didn't come through, and then we start attaching just individual events to just a series of beliefs that are nothing more than just internal chatter.
Yeah.
Right. That again can feel real, and then it can create this false sense of reality around us.
Well, not only that, but it robs you of your attention.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Something happens, because usually the stories you're talking about are negative in nature.
Right.
Okay. So an event happened. It meant nothing. However, the mind made up a story about what it meant.
Right.
Yeah. And then it starts adding layers and layers and layers upon the story until finally you were in resistance not only to that event, but now, because of the story, you've built, cultivated, generated resentment towards that person, that situation, and now you go victim to it. It's because of them. It's their fault. It's da-da-da-da-da. It's like, no, wrong. It's you. It's you listening to that story and then feeding it energy because you're paying attention to it. And now the story is just growing into something huge, still mouth closed, not fact-finding, not asking questions, not qualifying the story. And then the third R, so we got resistance, resentment, and then the third, revenge. And ladies and gentlemen, revenge is a dish best served cold, right? And so what happens? People leave the organization. They spread rumors. You
Right.
know what I mean? Slander, all kinds of just negative stuff. And it's like, what's the value in that, man? Besides the person who made up the story gets to be justified that they're right and they were victimized. And it was all fake news.
Yeah, fake news happening in our brain.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But like, okay, so I was saying that this has popped up over the last couple of days. One with my son, 12-year-old son. He was just going batshit crazy because he lost his cell phone in the morning. We're gonna, go to school and all that stuff, right?
Catastrophic.
And yeah, I mean, he was just a total world meltdown right there. and he's like, he said it, right? It just, and he said, man, he was just being so pessimistic, and he's not that type of kid. Like he's usually pretty positive, but he was just like in that rut, right? And he goes, I hate it when everything goes wrong and things go wrong all the time. Like he's so like
talking
he was,
in absolutes.
Yeah, talking in absolutes. Like what is going on? Like it's like what are we doing here? Like dude, you're 12. Like relax. And so he's going through this, right? Like what happened? It's like I lost my phone and we have to go to school and then this is gonna happen. So he started giving me like the entire story, right? I was like, wow, that's very elaborate. And then he was saying I'm not gonna have a phone by the time the bus drops me off at the bus stop and I can't call anybody. Like he's going on and on this catastrophic event. I was like, dude, that's a very, very creative story. And I told him that, right? I told him, listen, like 90% of the time in your life you're gonna worry about stuff that is more than likely not gonna happen. So sure enough, I mean, I don't know. We do a search of like 15 seconds and we find the phone, right?
Of course.
And this whole story that created chaos and oblivion in his world just faded away. It was a very important reminder for me, right? One, because I try to be very intentional about the thoughts that I let take over my mind. Right, there's a lot of thoughts that come through, and then I release a lot of the chatter, the junk, and all that stuff. Inevitably, though, like we're human beings, so stuff is gonna happen where like a thought leads you down a rabbit hole, and then you end up finding yourself in this potentiality, this story, this thing that that you're just kind of making up in your mind. Next thing you know, you lost 15-20 minutes on a story like that.
Oh gosh, minimum. I mean, people are just getting warmed up at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So now the point I'm trying to make is now those are the little ones, right? Like, okay, cool, you can find a phone and then the story's gone. But what about those stories that we build, more and more because we don't want to have a conversation, a difficult conversation with somebody else.
Oh, and they should know.
Yeah, they should know. Or this is happening because I'm getting isolated, or I'm getting attacked or indirectly attacked or whatnot. And we see that kind of shit in the workspace all the time.
Yeah,
like employees within employees and I mean, that kind of stuff is always out there, right? I think it's important to understand too that stories will rob us of opportunity. When a simple conversation, right, with somebody else or even with yourself, a simple conversation to be like practical and just logically minded for a second, as opposed to getting all emotional on potentialities, can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and if you think about, like, let's say it was as short as that 15 to 20 minutes, which I honestly think that most people spend, probably if they added it up, hours throughout the day thinking about that story and building layers and layers to like fortify it and make it real and justifiable and victim and all these kinds of things. Like if you were to redirect that attention into something that's positive, forward moving, focused, man, what could you create?
Yeah.
And what would be the benefit of that versus choosing to identify with the story and just allowing it to build and cause resentment and then revenge? Like, there's only one reason why people wouldn't go to the other person, let's say, in a situation and say, hey, you did this, I felt this way, and what was your intention with that? Or, have a conversation, for crying out loud. We're adult. And so the reason they don't do that is because they're afraid they're going to get, retaliation or fired or all kinds of stupid things. And it's like, it's just mature, expected communication. Like What's the problem?
And I get that, right? I get that happening. One thing that I feel like I can't stand, and it's going down the victim route.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay quiet, and then going down the victim route, and then keep telling yourself this story in your head, and just kind of let it unravel whichever way it wants, right? The reason I can't stand it now is because I used to do that a lot. I used to, as growing up, I would just keep shit bottled in, right?
Yeah.
And I would tell myself stories as opposed to opening up, my mouth and really go, this is what I'm thinking. And being authentic as to what I want, my desires and the beingness in me, right?
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, I would just, sit with it and just kind of fester with the ugly story in my head. And it would just, pile up. And I see people doing that shit all the time.
Oh, man.
Ask yourself this, the question, right? What stories are you telling yourself? And how is that impacting, or how are they impacting your life? How are they impacting your results? Are you leaning towards the victim, mentality because of the stories that you have built up in your head, as opposed to having just an open and honest conversation that can get shit handled in 5 minutes? Or are you choosing to live with assumptions and be reactive based on those assumptions that 90% of the time are going to be false?
Yeah. So, when I was a kid, I had every reason in the world to not ask questions and qualify stories. Yeah. Because when I was a kid, man, you didn't have a vote. You didn't have an opinion. You were to be seen, not heard.
Yeah.
And, God forbid you ever spoke up, right? And so I was just suppressed, if you will, since as early as I can remember.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, how I would operate with that story is that I would let that resentment build to resistance into resentment. And then the revenge would be, I would just explode like a volcano, discharge all that energy I've been storing up, bottling up, right? And so let me guess, when I discharge all that energy, it was at the right time with the right person with the right situation?
Of course.
Yeah, no. It was, we call that displaced aggression, right?
Yeah.
And so unhealthy for any relationship. And so as an adult, I just got to take a look at asking myself, where did this story come from? Why is it here? Why do I bottle it up? It doesn't feel good. There's no virtue in having a large capacity to store bullshit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's no value in that.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel good.
Let it go.
Yeah, man. Well,
let it go.
So
deal with it.
Let it go as in have a conversation,
Yeah.
not just let it go, forget it happened, because that's just
Yeah.
sweeping shit under the rug, ensuring you're going to trip over it later.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I just started practicing. As soon the first onset of any resistance, I'd have a conversation. I'd clear off that energy before it had a chance to build.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because when it builds so big and so tight, it's hard to have a conversation and communicate consciously, directly what really your issue is, because you've got so much energy on it.
Yeah.
And so the other person picks up on that as you're communicating, and it's
Right.
ineffective because they're going to get defensive, all kinds of stuff. So if you just have a conversation at the onset of that energy, you start making up a story, man, you can speak objectively about the situation, ask better questions, get answers,
Yeah.
and move on.
I think the difference too comes when we're being reactive, as opposed to proactive,
Mm-hmm.
right? To something that we're thinking. When we're in a proactive mode, we're critically thinking. We're okay, cool. I'm gonna cool down here for a second, even if I'm feeling pissed off of what I just assumed was the situation.
Let me check myself.
Right. Let me check myself. Okay. Let me collect myself. And then have some I love the term critical thinking, right? I have some critical thinking behind it, and then lean into it from a very practical or pragmatic standpoint.
Yeah.
And I get it. We're gonna get triggered, even as much as we try to control and manage and mitigate and suppress the ego and all that stuff. It's gonna bubble up at the end of the day. It's part of us, right? It doesn't control us. That's what matters.
Yeah.
So when we understand things, man, we look at what really matters. I feel I think we can get out a story and actually make better decisions, have better conversations, but we have to look at the ultimate outcome of what we want, and that's kind of taking the the energy or emotion out of it, but it's really not. It's just being proactive as to how to channel it.
Yeah,
if
100%.
if that makes sense.
It does. So, when I went from bottling it up and explode like a volcano,
Yeah.
I swung the pendulum to as soon as I got triggered,
Yeah.
I would instantly just discharge the energy. It's like, well, that doesn't work either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just the opposite side of the same coin,
Yeah.
right? And so what I switched to doing was I'll write it out. I'll write out what it is I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling, what is it I want to say.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, when I'm triggered, like what comes out is anger, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, that's not really what I want to communicate. That's discharging. So let me restate that objectively.
Yeah.
Because there is an end to which I want to get to in a resolution.
Yeah.
Right? And so how am I going to do that if I'm attacking, blaming, shaming, guilting? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So for me, a nice strategy is to write it out. Even if it's on my phone and notepad, I'm texting out like what I want to say.
Just process it, get it out of your system, and then see how much of a story it truly is.
Exactly. And then I can also get clear on, no, wait a minute, that's how I feel, but what's my question?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it helps me get reasonable, if you will, logical about the situation. And what is it I really want to know? And what am I really upset about? So it helps me organize and structure and get the energy off of it to like sift through and unearth the bottom line of the situation.
Yeah, if we care enough about things, man, we have to get make an intentional effort of understanding things.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and real important, real quick, as a leader, the entrepreneur, right? You're the CEO, the visionary. Okay, so if you either bottle things up or instantly discharge, either way, eventually the conversations you have with your people, the people you're leading, they're going to associate a conversation with you as scary,
explosive, scary,
and so
negative.
That's not a good culture, right? And so you want them to feel safe that they can come to you and bring their issues, problems, unspoken expectations that are unmet, all of that, because that's going to create some stickiness in your environment. People want to hang around for long term, and honesty and authenticity. Man, that's a connection. Those are good relationships.
Yeah, absolutely, and also, I mean, what it does, it creates transparency, man. If the last thing that you want, right, it's your own people not being able to open up to you because you're being blocked by this story that forces you to just be reactive all the time.
Yeah.
And I've seen, dude, like. Think about it, right? Like we're and this is in the context of business, but take that to relationships, take that to parenthood, take that to friendships.
Yeah. Well, and people think that they only show up a certain way in business, but then at home they show up a different way. It's like, you're full of shit. What you do here is what you do there is what you do everywhere. It's a mental model. It's a concept that you run and operate from. So if you're doing it in your business, you're doing it at home.
Yeah. And so, I mean, be aware of that kind of stuff, right? Like, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to understand when are we creating stories that are fallacies? When are we creating, bullshit around, our own goals that at the end of the day, it's nothing but chatter, it's nothing but noise.
So I had one come up earlier this morning in a coaching session. So lady said, well, I asked, what has you not willing to go outside your comfort zone? Like, why are you always operating from what you've always known? It's a memory of the past. You have a record of it and experience, and you're operating from it. But then you're expecting a different future that's elevated, but you're operating from the predictable past? That's weird. So what has you not willing to go out there? I know what the answer is that you're going to tell me, but I want you to verbalize it. And she said, well, it's the fear. It's the fear of the unknown, of stepping out there.
Yeah.
And it's like, great, let's inspect that story because it's full of shit. And if you created that story that is focusing on loss, fear, like all the negatives that could go wrong, well, why not just focus on its polar opposite of the opportunity? It's not a risk. This isn't an opportunity to lose everything.
Right.
Risk.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity to gain all I desire.
Yeah.
Like the magic that's available to me, the infinite potential realities, the abundance. Yeah. Like the excitement, something new, stimulating. And so why not focus on that with your story? Make up a story about what could go right if you're going to make up stories. Because you're wrong anyways. So, you know what I mean?
Well, but you can create positive outlooks, right? Now the and I get it. I mean, we're wired to survive. So the natural tendency is not to be the survivalist tendency is not to be, positive about, the outlook.
Yeah.
Okay, so hold on, let me finish that thought. So the natural tendency is to protect us from anything that deems danger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Survival.
So survival, right? Survival. Like if we see, I don't know, we see the market crashing, like there's going to be stuff that we're going to create stories around it, right? And then those are going to force us to have some type of assumption, some type of judgment, and then some type of reaction behind it. I mean, that's just how it works. Now, we're always going to be wired to protect and survive, not necessarily to thrive, right, and be optimistic. But it doesn't mean that we can't switch that button, right?
100%.
It doesn't mean that we can't intentionally switch the way our stories work.
Yeah.
And start working towards something positive, right? As opposed to just creating
Totally.
cloud after cloud after cloud in our brains.
Yeah. Well, so like I shared, like when I was a kid, you don't have a voice, you don't have a vote, you don't have an opinion, right?
Yeah.
Suppress it. And so I would discharge it all at some point, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's got their max,
Yeah.
And then, so we're naturally wired and default to negative, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are all facts. However, knowing that's just the standard operating program that you have or you were given or inherited is just an explanation of why you do it today. That doesn't mean you have a valid excuse to continue operating that way. You have the awareness now that, okay, that's the default setting. Great. What's an upgrade look like? And how do I practice that? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so simple. And I think it is easy too. There's a difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Simple in the construct of the model to switch to. Very simple. I become aware of I'm making up a story, and I can cue in on that because of how I'm feeling. It doesn't feel good. So if I'm not feeling good, I'm likely thinking lower negative thoughts, going victim. That's the cue, trigger. Yeah. Oh, what's going on right now? I'm making up a story. Okay. So what do I typically do? You'll know because it feels effortless to do it. And that's to continue making up a story. Okay. So how do I want to be different? Well, why don't I open my mouth and validate the story and see if it's true or not? Because has it ever been true before? No. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, well, there's a difference between story of the mind and intuition, right? So that's a different conversation. But so the process to change.
Yeah, but a lot
is
of times,
simple.
like that fear is going to be a false fear. It's going to be, or the issue is going to be a false issue. It's just an assumption that's not being tested.
Totally. So if it's negative
yeah.
or scary, fear, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
It's just a fucking story.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to die. Now, if you don't do anything differently than what you've always done and you don't like the results it produces, like, why are you expecting something different to happen? Like, I'm so confused on this. Open your damn mouth. Ask questions.
Yeah.
Be a big boy, be big girl. Put on your big boy pants. You know what I mean? And say something.
Get out a story.
Yeah.
How do you recognize when you're operating from story or from just assumed misconceptions?
Yeah, pretty simple, actually. I notice how effortless I'm operating. It's a habit, which means it's the old programming. Because I practiced it for decades, right? Like, I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
It takes no conscious involvement. So if I'm not thinking proactively and directing my mind, then I must be operating by habits. And those are likely of the old. So to be consciously present of what am I thinking? What am I feeling?
Isn't it crazy that we can be operating from story all the time, or most of the time, not even realize it?
We are. It's programmed.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know a lot of people that were programmed effectively, efficiently, at a high operating level from childhood.
Yeah.
Like, we're just not. So if you're not consistently working on yourself, you're going to default into the old.
Yeah.
And that's fucking weird because you're not going to produce great results with that. It's not going to feel good.
Yeah.
And you don't like it anyways.
Yeah.
So change is like, another thing that's coming up, and this ties in, is like, if you're forced to change, stop making up stories, let's say, it's likely because you have no other choice. You must or else, right?
Right.
There's an ultimate price to pay, let's say, if you don't change. Being forced to do that, man, that's not powerful. It's not a true choice. It's I have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with volunteering to say, hey, you know what? I don't like the way I operate. I don't feel good. Nothing good comes out of it. My relationships don't have a lot of depth.
Yeah.
I want different results. And it begins with I. It starts within.
Proactive versus reactive.
And so if I volunteer to do that, I decide, man, then it's like I get to call the shots.
Yeah.
I'm volunteering for this. I don't have to. and now I get to make mistakes.
I get to do it.
Yeah. It's a true choice.
It's very empowering too. I mean, it's a very, very empowering.
It's
space.
powerful as well. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you can invest your energy to move away from what you don't want or move towards what you do want. Both
Yeah.
are effective. One feels a hell of a lot better, and you've got a lot more options available to you. It's from an objective state of abundance.
Yeah. If you want to keep swimming in the lane of, in the pool of victimhood, then stay in story. By all means.
Well, and I don't really want to have a conversation with you.
So I mean, you're listening to the wrong podcast.
That's right.
But I mean, once we have the awareness of it, right? Just ask yourself a question like, what are these stories or just misconceived, assumptions? Because it's really what a lot of it is. It's not even. I mean, we had this thing, learning through junior high and all that stuff, like hypothesis. It's an educated guess. Educated guess is one thing, right? Like you're building up to something, and then you have something to back it up, and then some study, and data and whatnot. All these like the stories that I'm talking about, man. It's just like, oh, this happened, and I'm being, side railed because of this, and that. Next thing you know, you have a laundry list of why people in the world hate you, why you're gonna fail as a human being, or why the relationships are never gonna happen. Whatever that story is.
Ooh, that's important.
And like not letting that just run loose, right? It's gonna a point I want to highlight because I just saw it today. It's going to rob you of massive, massive opportunities.
Totally. Like when you start identifying with that story as if it's real, like it becomes the lens or filter in which you're perceiving all other information. And like the eyes can only see and the ears can only hear what the mind expects to see.
Yep.
So now you're looking for evidence that you get to stack to validate the story and be right about it. And it's like, that is so wrong. So, one of the stories I think that damages most relationships, unspoken expectations.
Ooh, yeah.
Think about it. You should have known. What the fuck? No, I shouldn't have known because you didn't say anything. Like, I'm a mind reader. I haven't figured out this whole telepathy thing, but when I do, man,
I'm working on it.
It's going to be great. Until then, I'll just open my mouth.
So,
open your asshole.
Yes. So eloquently put.
Thank you.
Stay at a story. Just, be real, have conversations, challenge those assumptions that you feel you have when they come and they pop into your head. Just challenge them, see how valid they are. And then don't look for self-validation on the shitty stories that you keep telling yourself, right? Because it's called actually the reticular activating system. It draws you into the stuff that you're already, kind of programmed to see. And if you program to see shitty stuff, or bad stories, that's all you're gonna get, right? So stay out of stories, challenge the assumptions that normally come to you as a reaction, and be proactive with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's really empowering when you get to take that back and you understand that the ability to understand and see the world around you, it's really resting on the way that you process your own thoughts. So
well, and if you stay out of story. You go back and have a conversation, open your asshole, verify, validate things. Then you get to take away objectively, like the lessons in the dynamic, and that is called wisdom that you get to move forward with.
Right.
So that or stay stupid.
Which then, I mean, it's crazy, but wisdom has baby wisdoms all the time.
Oh, I suppose you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that being said, it's a very wise thing to say, by the way. So I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
It's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, you go.
All right. With that, Justin, where can somebody get a hold of you if they want to continue the chat?
JustinThorstad.com, social media, YouTube at Mindset Coach JT, or my cell phone, 602-348-8534.
Bam. All right, fam. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mindset Monday podcast. And stay out of stories. Fucking stories are like they're bad. Like just creating stories and turbulence and clouds in your head. It's not a good practice. Lean into meditation and validate like the positive things in your life, right? So with that being said, do us a favor, if you like the podcast, send this out to somebody who you think might benefit from listening to it. Subscribe, like, and share. Follow me on social media at Rafael Cortez, CEO, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Stay focused. You got this. Bam!